What did you? So Havana syndrome. I thought this was in one spot, Cuba.
Right.
And then we talked.
Right.
I found out it was in Russia, and it's also been documented in Germany, China, England, Austria, India, Russia, Latin America,
Right.
Cuba, United States, inside the United States, Philadelphia, Washington D.C. to include inside the White House grounds.
So it's one of these stories that's a mystery, and I think to kind of put this in perspective, because there's no doubt something happened to me, and I'll tell you what I faced and kind of the initial attack, because it was pretty awful. But to put this in perspective, think about Agent Orange from the Vietnam era. Think about Gulf War syndrome from the first Gulf War. Think about burn pits. Something that's really prevalent now in the news. Jon Stewart, the comedians, has been an incredible, support for veterans who have been, sickened by the burn pits in Afghanistan and Iraq. And that's where this lies. These are medical mysteries that happen to kind of our national security professionals, where eventually, people are really harmed by it. Eventually, we find out what it is. So just kind of keep that in mind. But look, in 2016 in Havana, Cuba, at the U.S. Embassy there was a rash of these, kind of mysterious injuries in which U.S. intelligence officers and diplomats, as well as the Canadian embassy staff, heard this kind of high-pitched sound, but really suffered debilitating injuries. One of my colleagues there, a good friend of mine now, and it's incredible what's happened to him. I mean, he was subject to an attack like this, and he lost he lost eyesight. He's blind in one eye. He walks with a weighted vest as a service dog. This is someone who is serving in Havana, which is tip of the spear stuff. Cuban intelligence service is no joke, and so we're going to send people there who are at the top of their game. But this happened in 2016, and I really didn't think much of it. There was always a suspicion. Obviously, the Cubans were involved, but that perhaps the Russians were as well, and kind of in big investigation, it went nowhere. But we had dozens of U.S. government officials who were really suffered debilitating injuries. Some have had to be medically retired, and so that's the context when I go to Moscow in December 2017. And so I'm at a 5-star hotel about 2 blocks from the U.S. Embassy. Again, routine trip. Didn't expect anything. It was wearing a business suit. Something I had to do to kind of, I thought, for my credibility as a senior operations manager at our headquarters overseeing Russia, I got to go visit Russia. But I woke up in the middle of the night and I didn't hear anything, but it was this stunning case of vertigo. The room is spinning. I had terrible tinnitus, which is, ringing in my ears. Probably you have familiarity with that from kind of exposures to blasts but it was tinnitus. I was splitting headache, and I was felt physically sick. But it was just this incredible case of vertigo, which was frankly terrifying. And again, I told you about all the kind of the crazy moments in my life before in my career. Something really had happened. By the next morning, I went to a pharmacy with the U.S. Embassy officer. It was some kind of medication to kind of control the vertigo. It got a little bit better. Went to St. Petersburg for the night, came back, and then I suffered another spell. I remember at a Moscow restaurant and almost passed out. But the room spinning, and then I spent the next 36 hours in my hotel room before I kind of crawled home. But something awful happened to me, and I was with a colleague as well, someone who worked for me, traveling from headquarters. He was hit by this as well. He has lost hearing in one of his ears, and so something awful happened that time. I get back to our headquarters immediately, and my condition is actually getting worse. I go to our medical staff, and I say, "Hey, something really bad happened in Moscow. I've heard of things like this." To our folks in Havana, can you just check me out? And they kind of ran through some the protocols that they had developed for officers who had been hit by this unknown ailment in Havana. But they said they didn't seem that I kind of qualified for whatever reason. I didn't hear anything. They were very focused that I didn't actually hear anything. But my condition was getting worse. And again, I was in the senior intelligence service. I was the deputy, and then I became the acting chief of Europe and Eurasia. This is a job which a huge stepping stone to the really most senior ranks. But I couldn't even go to work. I mean, I was having debilitating headaches every day. At one point, by March of 2018, I lost the ability for long distance vision. I couldn't drive. I had suffered terrible cognitive difficulties with brain fog. And I was fucked up. Something really bad had happened, and I started going to every doctor under the sun. Meanwhile, I'm asking the staff at CIA, and this is where kind of my whole kind of life journey and story gets sad. I've given you my whole journey about this incredible career at the agency with highs and lows, but with always the underlying assumption about the camaraderie and kind of the greatness of the people there. So this is where this derails, because I'm going to the medical staff and they're just totally dismissing me. So I'm off on my own. I went to every doctor under the sun, whether it's neurologists, infectious disease doctors, allergists. I think I had about 6 or 7 MRIs. No one could figure out what was going on, but I was really suffering. And at that point, I was going to work 2 or 3 hours a day, but it just wasn't getting any better. And I was going through our operations directorate pleading for them to actually send me to the University of Pennsylvania, where they had sent some of the Havana victims. And our Office of Medical Services kept rejecting me. And it
Really?
just, this is a really terrible tale of incompetence. Because one of the things for me is, as a leader at CIA, by this point, again, when I left in that last job, I'm telling you about, I probably managed 1,000 or 2,000 people. But the whole point as a leader is if someone's hurting under your command, get them care. You don't have to argue with what happened. It's just a fundamental a tenet of leadership. If something's wrong with someone, just get them help. You don't have to argue with them how it happened. But they, I was trying to get to University of Pennsylvania, and they kind of rejected me outright. And so by July or by actually early spring of 2019, when I was turning 50, I was eligible to retire. I had to retire. I couldn't go to work anymore. I remember going into the deputy director of operations, the DDO, and telling her I had to kind of hang it up. And she said, "Will you please reconsider? I want to make you one of the ADDOs." This is the number 2 or 3, operations officer in the entire organization. That's what they were offering me. And the only reason why I don't say that bragging at all, because as I mentioned before, I had a lot of success and a lot of failures too. And one of the things I haven't mentioned, I think the biggest character trait for an intelligence officer is to have some humility, and I have a lot of that. But the story I have now is I'm not the story of a disgruntled employee. I was a really well-regarded officer who, again, was offered this incredibly senior job, but I had to retire. So in July of 2019, I kind of call it quits, but I'm a mess. And things actually get worse. So I retire. At the very end, the agency agreed to send me to the National Institute of Health. So they did relent a little bit to it's a 5-year research study, which was useless. They were good folks there at NIH, a world-renowned facility. I remember the highlight. So it's just testing. It's not designed to make me feel better, and that matters later on when I end up going to Walter Reed. But one of the things that I was so pissed at the end, and I wasn't getting better, and I wasn't getting the treatment. The agency said, "Whatever you do when you go to NIH, don't tell them you're coming from CIA, because we want to keep that secret." So I remember going to our store at CIA headquarters and buying about 30 CIA golf balls, and the next day handing them out to all the staff at NIH. That was my victory. So what the fuck, whatever. But ultimately I had to retire because of this. But that's really where kind of the medical journey begins, because my condition really worsened in retirement, and my pleadings to the agency, formally and informally in retirement, to send me to Walter Reed's Traumatic Brain Injury Center, where some other officers actually started going to, because they'd been getting. So what happened to me in Moscow started happening as I'm retiring. It's happening to some of my colleagues also doing Russia operations. Really fucking weird. And they are starting to get to Walter Reed, because their TBI centers, Walter Reed actually believes something bad is happening. So I start asking informally to get there as well. And again, the answer was always no. And it caused me to take a decision, which certainly changed my life, which is to go public.
Yeah.
So in October of 2020, I contacted a journalist named Julia Yaffe, who writes for GQ. At that time, she was writing for GQ. She's a Russia expert. She's a rock star. And I chose her very clearly, and I had a talk with her. I said, "I want you to tell my story, but I can't come out across as a crazy person. But I just need you to tell the story, because the story is designed to force the agency to send me to Walter Reed. They're sending other people there. They're saying no to sending me there, and I need to go public with this." And just imagine, Shawn, the idea of, someone 26 years at the agency, my whole life was in the shadows. I did all this crazy CT shit, and now I'm actually going to go and start, which is in essence a public fight with CIA. which is what I did, and the blowback was severe and caused a lot of fucking heartache for me.
Yeah. I mean, this seems to be extremely targeted. It looks, in my research, everybody that's kind of come out has been a government official, and I believe it said I found half of the victims have been CIA personnel.
Yep.
One family was hit in China and then hit again in Philadelphia.
Right.
Then there's two different reports of personnel being hit on a staircase outside the White House. And there's only 3 countries on record that have kind of dabbled in microwave weapons.
Yep.
U.S., China, Russia.
Well, so let me say first and foremost on this issue. There's no doubt to me that something is happening. And what's interesting is so after I went public, the reaction was I'll talk about that in a second because that's more of a personal story. But we know the Russians have this. It is an open source information. The Russians have dabbled in this technology and in these weapons, and they've admitted it. As I've come along, whether it's when in the Trump administration or the Biden administration, people across the aisle believe this is happening. So when I personally sat next to John Bolton, former national security advisor, he said abso-fucking-lutely, because 2 of his people under his tutelage, under his command, were hit by this. I had a beer with Chris Miller, the former acting Secretary of Defense in the Trump administration, former 5th Group guy who I'd met years earlier in Iraq. And he said, absolutely, because there are U.S. military members who have been hit by this, who've come back and he met them. And then, of course, just, in dealing with kind of with Bill Burns and kind of the current crop of national security officials. But, Russia has the expertise in this. And certainly I would say they would have the intent because it's taking, Americans off the playing field. But there's a couple stories on this. There's 3 bins I put this story in. One is how the U.S. government has treated us so poorly who have come forward on this and not getting health care. The second bin, so there's an accountability piece because they screwed this up. The second bin is the health care piece, and they're better at that. And then the last is who's doing it, culpability, and what does that mean? And so it's all kind of interwoven, but it's been such a for the victims of this. Again, I've met these people, I know these people, I've served with them in the field. A whole bunch of them have done Russian operations in the past, so it's pretty suspicious to me that they're being kind of hit right now. The bad part about it is, and this is why when I finally made it to Walter Reed, to the Traumatic Brain Injury Center, I identified so much with the whether it's the SEALs or the Air Force Combat Controllers or others who are going through their own TBIs. It's this silent injury. Nobody believes you. Yeah. So if you're a team guy and your fucking head's killing you, and you're having depression and suicidal thoughts, but nothing looks bad on you. If you say I got to take a knee, everyone's going to look at you a little weird. Same thing with this, what happened with the Havana syndrome stuff is, I wish I'd been shot, but in the meantime, I have a splitting headache that never goes away. I have it now. I got some kind of cool new experimental treatment that's made it a lot better for me. But ultimately, it's that kind of that unseen silent wound, and so. It's one of those things that we have to kind of get to the bottom of, because there are really outstanding U.S. national security professionals who have done incredible things for the U.S. government, who are now kind of taken off the battlefield, and colleagues of mine have to I retire, but they're having to retire as well. If you talk to CI Director Bill Burns privately, he says absolutely this is happening. The investigation, I don't know. I don't know what they're uncovering or not, and I do get a sense that there's concerns about liability within the U.S. government on this, just because so many of us, So ultimately, it took me 4 years to get to Walter Reed. When I finally got to Walter Reed's Traumatic Brain Injury Center, which it's called NICO, the National Intrepid Center of Excellence. It's the world's leading center, which has treated thousands of veterans. After 20 years of sustained combat in Iraq and Afghanistan, they have no doubt that something has happened to us. There's kind of unanimity in the kind of the medical field that you've been subject to something, and so the idea that it took so long for me to get there, when Bill Burns went there, CI director, so did Jake Sullivan, national security advisor, and my doctors told them, TBI doesn't get better over time. It took you 4 years for Marc to get here. That's unconscionable. And one of the things that was amazing, they also said, if you keep doing this, if you keep delaying care, you're going to have a rash of suicides on your hands.
Yeah.
Of agency officers who have been subject to this, who can't get care. And so they've gotten better at it. But damn, we got to get to the bottom of this. And you asked the opening question you had in the whole interview today was about UFOs. Like, that's not what I want to be associated with.
Yeah.
So I'm not one of those folks with the, think there's a tinfoil out of my, wearing a helmet outside of CIA headquarters. We're always, protesting. This is something real and serious. But it's not been handled well, and a lot of people have suffered, including myself.
All the victims that I watch their interviews all say pretty much the exact same thing.
Yeah.
They hear something,
right.
The vertigo, traumatic brain injury. One male said that he was in a hotel and a van pulled up.
Yeah.
And right after the van pulled up, he felt it.
Right.
And then the van pulled up again. I believe it was the next night. Felt it again.
Let me tell you. So this is something from your old world. So it's interesting. So much you can as you did your research, you can find out through open source. But maybe 2 years ago, there was a bid for body worn kind of detectors for this kind of attack, and it was a bid. It was from SOCOM that they wanted the operators to start wearing these things. So that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
If people don't think this is real, and so again, when I talk to Chris Miller, when I talk to others, I mean, this is something that is of serious concern. One of our officers, let me clarify that, a USG officer, official, was stricken in Hanoi hours before Vice President Harris was supposed to arrive. I think it was last year or the year before. That scared the crap out of everybody. This officer was severely injured. But what does that say? To me, and I think to others, there's a message that even our VIPs are vulnerable. And again, I think the Secret Service is taking this seriously as anyone in kind of executive protection, because there is someone is doing this to us.
Are they 100% sure it's microwaves?
They're not 100% sure of anything. And I got to be careful on this because I don't know. I've been out of government since 2019, so it's everything from people inside kind of quietly telling me to talking to tons of doctors. I mean, there's a really interesting panel. They put together an experts panel. The director of the DNI did on this, which is really interesting because they came out with their executive summary just a couple months ago, and they said, yeah, this is likely a directed energy attack. And I think that that's the world's leading experts on this, saying that this is happening to us.
This is scary shit. I mean, this goes through glass, goes through walls,
right.
Goes through buildings, pretty
Shawn,
much goes through everything.
And one of the things that's happened in some of our officers, and I know these officers, there's no doubt on these, their family members have been affected. And so in one case, a young child who has a permanent traumatic brain injury, diagnosed by doctors in D.C. There's no doubt about this. So, so one of the things that you see a lot in the media on this is, well, maybe it's psychosomatic, maybe it's a directed energy attack. To the actual doctors who have treated us, there is no doubt. It's not if you were subject to something. Is that it is you were subject to something. We're still not exactly sure what it is. It's most likely a directed energy weapon, and that's pretty fucking scary.
Yeah.
And again, what a weird, for me, on a personal note, what a weird way to end my career.
Yeah.
And look, I'm still, I'm still suffering from this for sure. But after all those years in shitty places, fuck.
Damn.
This happens. And let's get some more of a personal level. There's a mental health aspect of this too. So, I finally make it so I go public in October 2020 on this. The blowback from, my best friends and my colleagues in the agency was severe, because I did something that you're not supposed to do. Is go now. To their credit, 3 former CI directors immediately called our 7th floor and said, "What the fuck?" And they then kind of relented and got me into Walter Reed. So I arrive at Walter Reed in January of 2021, and I'm a mess. Not only because of the physical pain I'm in with my headaches and occasional bouts of vertigo, but some cognitive decline. But it's also there's a moral injury here where I've been totally shunned by all my colleagues. I had friends calling me or sending me message on encrypted apps saying we've been told by the 7th floor not to speak with you. The lawyer, and first of all, that's bullshit. The lawyers are telling us we can't talk to you. Well, how about what they can say is don't talk to Marc about this issue. But for fuck's sake, I worked for 2.5 decades in the field with them.
Yeah.
And so I arrived at Walter Reed. My mental health was all fucked up with anxiety and everything. I mean, I'd heard they were threatening, to come after me in terms of, crimes reports because I'd spoken to the press. Now, I was very cognizant in not violating my secrecy agreement. I told my medical story. The journalist, Julia Yaffe, did a huge piece on this whole thing. So I don't even know the sources she had, but, my piece, I'm still very comfortable in that I never violated any part of my secrecy agreement, but there were rumors that they were going to try to come after me. And so I was a freaking mess. When I got to Walter Reed, they were like, okay, you got a bad headache all the time and you're a little, you got some cognitive decline. We're going to try to fix you on this, but we hope you don't kill yourself. And my anxiety level was out of control. And that's where they helped me kind of the most. They have 18 people who kind of swarm over you for a month. And again, this old Marine Corps chaplain was the guy, and I joked about before when he talked about any kind of regrets on kind of war zone duty and lethal operations. But what he taught me was forgiveness, because I was so angry at the agency and all my friends. And his story of just talking about empathy and compassion and forgiveness was not like these motherfuckers wronged you. And they always will. And you don't ever have to be friends with them, but just kind of release the anger against them.
It's for you. It's for your health.
Yep. Totally. And I saw psychiatrists, psychologists. Walter Reed is famous. This program, NICO, is famous, and the special operations community has embraced it. I had this incredible kind of cocktail of these acupuncture treatments. It's really famous for it. They really know about traumatic, and by the way, I was diagnosed with a traumatic brain injury. So the Walter Reed doctors are like, yep, Marc got fucked up by something. So I have that piece of paper. I remember when I first got that, man, I had tears in my eyes. So these fucking agency doctors said no for a couple of years. And now the world's leading TBI center said, yep. And they said, you got a TBI from an external exposure event. So that was really groundbreaking. But back to the Marine Corps chaplain, I was kind of releasing that anger. My anxiety really, he actually saved me. I didn't go, try the pharmaceutical option. And I don't kind of respond well to drugs. I do respond well to gummy bears.
Yeah.
A little something in them, which Walter Reed was totally for. But ultimately that Marine Corps chaplain taught me about forgiveness, and that helped me a lot. And so now, as I still go there, I'm still trying to kind of battle just some of the pain I have, which kind of flares up now and again. The one of the things they do is this art therapy program. It's famous. They're famous for these masks. So it was on the front cover of National Geographic, I think back in 2015. But everyone who goes there in the program, and again, it's this intensive outpatient program. You're there for 10 hours every day. So I think probably half a dev group and Delta has been there, tons of SF. I mean, there's huge walls inside of NICO where each unit, and the CIA has got a big wall now too from all of the Havana syndrome victims. But it's the SEALs, it's Army, then they have the CCTs and from Air Force, and you design a mask, and it's just mask, and you paint it, and you put it's a creation of art, but it's how you express yourself. And I'm not an artist at all, but it was what I did was kind of this cathartic experience for me where I took a mask and I painted Superman on it, because that's what I thought my kids thought of me. Here I was the guy, the dad who was gone all the time, which sucked, but I was defending them and defending America, and my kids were proud of me. But it was a Superman mask, and then in it was an ice pick, which signified my headaches, and then I overlaid this mask on top of a piece of wood, which I carved the CIA seal, which was cracked in half, because that was the betrayal of the organization. And it's hanging in NICO right now, and I just talked to the art therapist. She said everybody comes and sees that. That's kind of the signature piece for the CIA portion for the Havana syndrome victims. But again, it's Bill Burns has seen it. Jake Sullivan, the National Security Advisor, saw it. It's important they see this, because this is the way we've been treated. But making that mask has been really cathartic. But it's again, it's the idea of people that I served with for years and years really abandoned me. It was really sad, and to me to this day, I think anyone who goes public, decides in our old world to be out in the media or do something like this probably has experience with that. I don't know if you feel that same way.
Oh, yeah.
Some of your guests too. I obviously watched Rob O'Neill's interview, which was fantastic, but really interesting piece where you asked him, about what he thought about if people didn't, weren't so positive about him going and talking about his role in the Bin Laden raid, and he said, "Yeah, it doesn't bother me anymore," or something like that, and because it does matter to all of us, because we're a member of this kind of elite fraternity, and when you get ostracized by that, it can be pretty painful.
Yeah, it sucks. Moving away from it though, it's like, because I've dealt with it a lot, and once you move past it, it's just like freedom.
I agree with you.
It really is.
But there's a process in that.
Yeah.
And it's not easy. And what's interesting to me is as I have been vocal about this issue, and then that ultimately Congress passes legislation called the Havana Act, which is going to provide compensation for not necessarily people like me. I don't care. I'm senior and I'm fine financially. But what about the GS11 or GS12 who's medically retired? And so there's going to be some liability from the U.S. government, and so President signed this. I sat, I keep saying we're not talking about politics. We won't, but I sat in a room with Devin Nunes and Adam Schiff, who hate each other. This is the ranking minority and majority member of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. They hate each other on every issue except this one, where they totally agree. President signs a law. There's going to be some financial relief for folks, and so all of a sudden, people from the agency, who abandoned me for a long time, are calling me again, and I've had to kind of process that. But I go back to what that Marine Corps chaplain said. Just I'm polite to everyone, but I won't forget the people who abandoned me. And ultimately, you're right, because as what I've tried to do, and I wrote a book on leadership. I do a lot of kind of leadership talks to sports teams now. I'm on, baseball is a passion, so I talk to a lot of high school and college baseball teams. The more I get away from, my old world, probably the better, because the end was really unhealthy, both physically but also mentally too. And again, you sit and you talk about, scratch your head. You're sitting having I'm not supposed to, but if I have a scotch or two. What did I do the last 30 years? And there's a lot of good, a lot of bad. It ended really in a shitty manner. And, I'm 53 years old now, or turning 53 soon. There's got to be another kind of chapter in my journey. I got some time left, I hope.
Before we go into that chapter, let's just rewind a little bit. So knowing that the U.S., China, and Russia are the only three people governments that have come out and said that they've dabbled in microwave weapons. Yeah. I mean, you have to have sat at home and thought about who is responsible, who targeted you, because it's very obvious they're targeting specific individuals.
Right.
What's going through your head?
Well, so for me, it's easy. Look, so I was, I had known, I obviously, as a CI officer, I spent a lot of time in the Middle East, and the Russians knew who I was always. Interestingly, when I went to Moscow, they didn't want me to make the trip. The Russian embassy in D.C. Tried to cancel the trip. They accused me of trying to come for an operational matter. I'm a freaking senior intelligence service officer known to half the planet. I'm coming here to meet with your officials. There's no operational reason for my trip. But I don't think they liked me very much. But it was, to me, my thought on this is the Russians have targeted CIA officials who have been involved in Russian operations because it's part of their hybrid warfare strategy. I mean, if you look at, and China does this too, but this is a step below kinetic events. And so if they're able to take some of our most experienced officers off the battlefield in a non-attributable way, it's perfect.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense to me. It also makes sense, obviously Vladimir Putin is someone of zero morals or ethics. It's right in line with his war crimes and atrocities and assassinations that Russians the Russian state has committed over the last decade plus. But it does make some sense. And again, it's part of their hybrid warfare strategy, and ultimately it's been successful because not only has it really taken really quality intelligence officers out of the intelligence game, it's also caused this huge kind of dissension. I mean, think of it. So when you say Havana syndrome, some people roll their eyes, some people don't believe this. This is exactly what the Russians want.
Yeah.
Is to kind of cause chaos. So in my view, it's been wildly successful. But that's why we got to find out who's doing this. And my contention, and I was heartened to see, I think it was Senator Collins, who's been a big advocate of this. There's certain representatives and senators who are really good on this across the political spectrum because they have constituents who have been affected by this. So, for Senator Collins, there's CIA officers who are from her state, and just like you have Marco Rubio has been a huge proponent of really pushing the U.S. government on this because obviously he cares a lot about Cuba. So, but Senator Collins said, look, we have to get to the bottom of this because this is in essence a war crime. She said it's an act of war, not a war crime. Excuse me. She said it's an act of war against our personnel, and she's right.
Do you think there's any possibility it could have come from within?
No, I don't. I don't. For just to me, there's been. I got to say this carefully. I'm going to quote the GQ article. That's why I stay safe on this. There has been investigations by the U.S. intelligence community, and again, this is from the article in GQ, and it's been repeated other times as well, in which there has been correlation of travel of Russian intelligence officers to the locations where our officers were hit.
No shit.
So now that is a pretty damn strong circumstantial case. What does that mean? I would say keep fucking investigating, keep looking at it.
Yeah.
So that's where I kind of come out on this. And again, it took us 10 years to find bin Laden. Right now with if you remember Gulf War syndrome from the first Gulf War, I think they've concluded, and this is decades later, that it was exposure to sarin gas. It was from U.S. military strikes on the sarin stockpiles that the Iraqis had, is what sickened hundreds, if not thousands of U.S. military personnel. It's going to take a while to find out what this is.
Yeah.
But I would be amazed if it's not the Russians, or it also could be a combination of adversaries. It could be the Cubans at first. It could be the Russians and the Chinese.
Yeah.
So that's really where I come down on that. But just have the fortitude to keep going. Just because we don't know right now shouldn't stop us.
Are there any foreign intelligence officers that you're aware of that have been hit?
No, that's the mystery.
All been U.S.
It's weird. Canadian diplomats.
Canadians.
But right. So I think that when you talk to the Brits, there's a question of why isn't it happening to them. I can't answer that. There's a lot of holes in this.
Yeah.
Because you would think that our allies would be hit by this too. But again, as I when I sit with individuals who have been struck by this, they have suffered severe injuries. I'm one of the fortunate ones, and friends of mine are like, "Mark, you seem fine." I'm like, "Well, compared to others, yeah, I have a fucking headache all the time,
yeah.
Still." But ultimately, something really bad happened, and we got to find out what it is. Just because, again, this is one of those total mysteries, and I don't want it to be treated like frickin' UFOs. It's because sometimes it gets put in that same bin.
Yeah.
But this is a little bit different. This is a lot different.
Yeah. Are you still looking for ways to manage the pain or to improve?
Sure.
Hopefully
Again, there's been it's really interesting. There's been an outpouring, from just so many people, and there's a new therapy that Havana syndrome victims are using. Originally, it was designed for, and it still is for, autistic kids. It's called MERT. It's taking a little magnet and just they tap it against the side of your head. For whatever reason, they started. There's an incredible company. There's some former, in fact, Slab Brett Slabinski is involved. Out in California that has kind of pioneered this for autistic kids, but they came to us, some of the Havana syndrome victims, and offered us some treatment. So it's for me it was kind of life changing. It was 5 weeks. There was an anonymous donor. Don't know who it was. It's fucking expensive, but some great Americans decided to try to help us, and it's changed my life in the sense of my headaches are drastically diminished. And it makes some sense. And so, and I went to Walter Reed after that, and I said, "What do you think of this?" It's called TMS treatment, but but again, it's usually designed for autistic patients or for PTS, but they want to use it for Havana syndrome victims. And the Walter Reed doctors, who are pretty amazingly enough for the military, they're pretty kind of new age, and their thinking. I mean, Walter Reed they're pioneering use of psychedelics and all sorts of stuff, which I freaking love. And I think you talk about this a lot too.
I was going to ask that.
Yeah.
Have you looked into psychedelic treatments?
I am interested. I got to see how I'm doing. But ultimately, Walter Reed was like, yeah, that makes sense. Because it's all about it's your brain waves. So something has happened to our brains with this thing.
Yeah, I did that treatment.
You did.
And a lot of the people that have been on the show have done that treatment, and everybody is having these profound results.
Yep.
I'd love to connect you.
Yeah.
If you're interested.
For sure, I am. Trust me, because there's been a lot of suffering involved, and so I have my good days and bad days. I'm on a good day right here, probably because I'm enjoying the good life in Nashville, the good food here.
Yeah.
But there's still some shitty times, and again, it's when you get to a point where you'll try anything. And the last thing, it is interesting to me seeing how much I've suffered. I mean, I've been in pain for 4 years, and I know that you can relate to that, and people in the special operations community just after 2 decades of war and all the trauma that people have faced. But the easiest thing to do is it's not even hitting the bottle, because having a drink will help. But it's good that I can see how people get addicted to opioids now, because you're sitting around and you're in pain all the time.
Yeah.
And you will do anything to get rid of that pain. Now, I don't have that addictive personality, I guess, enough where that I'm worried about that. Certainly drinking is not great. And the more I can cut down on that, the better, because if I have a bad headache, you have a scotch or two, you feel better. But that's not a healthy or the right answer. But I'm always looking for new things to do, because again, it's this lifelong search of how not be in pain all the time.
Well, I'm going to connect you then.
Sure.
I did it, and it changed my whole life.
Yeah.
It's the most profound experience I've ever.
Well, please do. Shawn, one of the interesting things is, so I go to NICO. I go to Walter Reed, and after that time, half a dozen folks really good friends of mine from your old community, from the SOF community, came out, and these are folks from Dev Group or from Delta or from White SEALs or from Special Forces, and they all said they'd been there too. They just hadn't talked about it. And so, it was a really amazing experience for me, not only because they care about you and they try to help you, but also this is 2 decades. And I'm a little different because the Havana syndrome stuff, there's a whole cohort of us being treated there, but just to see what the last 2 decades have done to men and women in the intelligence special operations world, it's extraordinary. And these are, the toughest people I've ever met in my life, and they are in real bad straits.
Yeah.
And it's sad, but it is 100% real, and it's pretty profound, because these brain injury is something that's, again, in these art therapy sessions, I remember myself and one other person, he gets more credit than I do, but he painted this giant black canvas, something that would be on here, and like the size of that flag. It's all black, but then he took a can of red paint and he threw it on there, and there was kind of a splotch of red paint. And he called it the gunshot, and everyone was like, what the hell is that? And he's like, I wish I was shot. This signifies, because brain injuries don't show up on anything. Sometimes on MRIs, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't.
Yeah.
But he goes, I wish I was shot, because ultimately then people would believe me. They know how to treat me. So it's pretty scary.
It's humiliating at times to deal with that.
But I tell you, but being, again, I was being with some of the SEALs and the CCTs, and these are tough son of a bitches, and they were wonderful, kind of part of the cohort to go through. But just and I mean, this is going to sound, and not to see them vulnerable, but just to see that other people are